Okay, we're going to do an update on crypto here and really use Bitcoin and Ether as your proxy. I mean, I think a lot of the other alt layer ones are just down massively. Clearly, the whole market, we're in a bear market for whatever that term is worth. And so, just looking at the daily chart, and in some ways, the daily chart doesn't even matter as much anymore. We're going to really kind of focus on the weekly and monthly because the larger top is in. And so, what you want to focus on now is when might we know that, when might we have a better sense that the bottom is really in. And you're not going to do that looking at a daily chart. Well, you're going to do that by sort of triangulating from a larger time frame chart, like a monthly chart, and then you'll kind of zoom into the daily. But right now, this is consolidating for now on the daily. The 10-day moving average is like in the $32,000 range for Bitcoin. So we could easily bounce, into that zone. Maybe even get up to this candle here, so like up to the 34,000 range before another leg down. But that's Bitcoin, and then looking at Ether, very similar picture. You have this long wick, which usually means that people like, especially that this is red, where this low is probably not going to hold. Notice it did stop at 1700, like right on the dot, which is like a double bottom from a previous low. I would think we're going to get definitely into like the 1400 area, which was the top from the 2020 cycle. But we'll see. I think more importantly, we have probably a lot of time to fall. We'll have to see if a fundamental catalyst can shift things, like the merge, for instance. And so, more importantly, going to like those higher time frame charts, looking at the weekly. So it does appear that that January 24th low was a weekly cycle low, right? You could draw any trend line you want through here. We broke above the 10 period moving average, and this was a convincing rally. I mean, look at these three beautiful weeks. This is Ether here. Then we had this rejection this 1 week, right? We got the high on week 9, right? So the rally starting here. This was a little bit scary, but the low held. And then we got to week 9, got rejected. And then we just made new lows every week after. I'll zoom in here, right? New low every week after, right? New low, new low, new low, new low. And now a big new low. But now we have a wick to sort of tempt people. And I think this is, potentially your daily cycle bounce, which is really just this is so stretched. You're gonna need to have a little bit of consolidation before the next leg down. That's just how price action works, right? And so I would not want to get sucked into this. We've clearly went below the previous weekly cycle low, and the one before that was down. Yeah, and this is your double bottom, right? So this was your low from June 2021 when we had this sort of meltdown, right? We consolidated here after we made that low. Well, we consolidated around here, made the big low, consolidated a little more, and then we got a rally out of that. But I mean, that kind of petered out essentially. And so looking at Bitcoin, it's pretty much the same count. It's week 15, week 9 top. And notice these weekly cycles are long, 30, 40 weeks for Bitcoin. In the case of Ether, the previous one was 31 weeks. The one before that, 39, 28, 24. So we're like right in the middle of the cycle, and we've already made fresh lows from the previous cycle. And so this could get really ugly, but that's the opportunity, right? That's your opportunity to wait for the right time to begin to accumulate, to begin to kind of dollar cost average. And depending on how aggressive you are, you might start sooner than later, but I think this is probably pretty soon. I mean, think about it again. If a weekly cycle is, let's say, 20, 30 weeks, and we're only on week 15, it's probably early to be buying. Again, we're going to get a rally here, I'm sure, but that rally is most likely going to end in a lower high. I mean, you can imagine the high of this week, right? That was 2,500 for Ether and 40,000 for Bitcoin. That's going to prove to be some serious resistance. I mean, if we blow through those, those levels, maybe even have a successful back test from above, then completely different story. But other than that, I think we have a slog here. So that's the weekly cycle picture, right? So call it 15 more weeks until the low. And that doesn't mean we're going to go straight down waterfall again. There's going to be consolidation along the way, bounces higher, you would imagine. But what you really want to pay attention to is the monthly chart. And so I had my last video on crypto, I think it was the last day of April. And I talked about how the top was probably in. And for Ether, it's a 15-month cycle that it tends to have, right? The last one having bottomed on that June, the last one being that $1,700 bottom, which we just tested, right? We tested and we bounced. I doubt we don't revisit below that level, so below 1,700. And so you see this cycle was 15 months. Top was on month 6, so it was ugly. We're setting up for something similar here, right? In this case, we have a top on month 5, and now we're in month 11. So that would presumably mean another 4 months. You see, I have marked here October 2022 as the potential the start of the next 15-month cycle. Now, I always say this, and it's important, these numbers are not mystical. For instance, this cycle was only 9 months, right? Like that's just what the price action is telling you, right? You had a swing low. Well, in this case, right, that's interesting, right? Right, you did make you made a marginal higher high on the monthly level, and then you continued to kind of roll over. So the cycles can go shorter or longer, but so far they've been in the 15-month range. This one you could say it was 14 months. Top was on month 8, so right translated. So we're in the process of a left translated cycle that has been in the neighborhood of 15 months, and we're on month 11. So like we still have some downside to go in terms of time, both time and price, but that means that's the opportunity. Be patient, right? What we're waiting for is a swing low. This is a perfect example, right? Like if I zoom in here, that was the low from, I mean, this is a lot of things did this, right? This was your March 2020 bottom. The next month we didn't make a new high, we consolidated. This was an inside month, but it was green, so moving in the right direction. Then we made a new high on the next month. Then we consolidated some more, but it was red, a little bit frustrating. And then we really had the breakout in July. I mean, look at this. Once we go above the high of this candle, boom, and then we have big follow through the following month. And then we have this period where, I mean, this is just amazing. New high, big new high, new high, new high. This was scary. This was probably a tough month to stay long. February 2021, that makes sense, right? That was the sort of crash you had in growth stocks, etc. And so there's no way to know if the next cycle is going to be really bullish like this one was, right? I suspect it will be with the merge and everything, right? With Ethereum going from proof of work to proof of stake, the supply, supply demand and that dynamics are really going to skew in favor of supply being massively reduced and demand being increased. And so maybe we get a low around that autumn period, right? September, October, and we get a furious rally new cycle. We'll have to see. And for Bitcoin, it's the famous 4-year cycle. Bob Lucas talks about it. A lot of people talk about it on Twitter. It also coincides with the Bitcoin halvening, right? Every 200,000 blocks, the block reward is reduced by 50%, right? And so the next halvening, every block that is mined produces 50% less Bitcoin. So when Bitcoin started, every block mined produced 50 Bitcoin, and then it was halved to 25, and then 12.5, and then 6.25. So I think we're going to go to about like 3 point something. And so that generally is the catalyst for the next kind of cycle. And so if it were a perfect 48 months, which it generally isn't, or excuse me, perfect 4 years, it would be 48 months, which it generally isn't. The cycle that ended on December 2018, that actually ended, interesting. I guess that ended right around the Christmas Eve panic. That cycle was actually exactly 47 months. So very close to 48 months, topped out on month 35. And then we have this cycle that we're in right now, right? We had what looked like a high in real time here, but we came back and made a marginal new high. That was the one we made in November, the 69,000 high. That was month 35. So we're now in month 41. So that, right, 36, 37, 38, 40, 41, right? And so if it's a 48-month cycle, you would imagine we're going to get our low later this year, December 2022, around month 48. That might be too easy, might be too simple. There isn't a lot of data here, but if you think about the lower time frames, right? Like this is where you kind of connect the dots. If we get, let's just kind of like put a scenario out there, right? Like let's say we continue to fall for, another, call it 30, we get to 30 weeks, right? That would that would give us a weekly cycle low around August. And then that would be 16 weeks to the 4-year cycle low. That's interesting. Right. And so you could see a world where maybe this even gets extended, right? So this, we get like a 25-week cycle. So that gets you to January 2023, January 30. So the end of January. So you end up with like a 49, 50 month, 4-year cycle. Because again, they don't have to be sort of right on the dot. That's how you can kind of think about how the different cycles are going to kind of play together. But suffice it to say, it would seem there are many more months of downside. And so there's no need to feel like you have to rush in, and we'll know when we get that low because we'll have that swing low. Nothing's going to catch you by surprise. We'll see the swing low on the daily time frame. If there's follow through, it'll cascade to the weekly. If there's follow through there, it'll show up on this month. Oh, well, this is a weekly chart. It'll show up on the monthly chart, and that's when you know you're really in business. Because you think about, like, we've already declined this much, right? I'll give you an example. Like, this was a swing low, right? Like, let's just zoom in, right? This in real time was a swing low. It was promising. We had made a new high on the monthly, right? And so this actually became your swing low, and we were about to make a high above this candle, which we really needed to do, and then we got rejected, right? We got the pullback because you can see the wick on an upper wick, and then the following month we consolidated, but it was red. This was damaging. I mean, look at the downside here. We opened here, closed here, and this month May we've got the big follow through again. So in terms of levels, where can we end up? I mean, who knows, right? But like if you really look at the structure of this chart, like there's no reason why we couldn't end up at like 13,000, 14,000, right? Now, people will say, no, that's crazy. There's no way we can get down there. But I say that there's no reason we couldn't get down there and still just sort of rocket launch out of there. In terms of the structure of this chart, this was kind of your base, right? You can kind of almost sort of, if I will, I'll kind of draw a box around it almost. Right? So you kind of just consolidated in this range, right? And then we had the massive breakout, came back higher low, weren't really able to make a significant higher high. And so why couldn't we come back and test the edge of this box, if you will? So maybe it's more like, this puts you at like 16,000, but either way, some level below 20, right? And I think a similar thing for Ether, right? If you kind of look at the Ether chart, let's see what would that level be, right? It'll be a level that people feel like, oh well, that's kind of unthinkable. It's like, nah, not really, right? Like there's no reason price can't trade down to those kinds of levels and then recover like nothing ever happened almost. So for Ether, we're talking in the, we could break 1,000 easily. So that's another 50%. Now I'm not saying that's going to happen. There's no way to know, but I'm saying that could happen, and it could be totally fine in the context of making a major low and potentially having a rocket shot out of it, especially for something like Ether, where that the merge has such a massive catalyst for supply demand. So this is really exciting. I mean, imagine being able to get a piece of ETH, for closer to $1,000. I mean, even down here, up here at 2,000, or down here, whatever your perspective, it's obviously a bit of a bargain. And the last thing I will show, which I think is really important, and I mentioned this in my last video, is that we haven't made a lower low on the yearly chart for Ether in quite some time, which is very promising, very bullish on the highest time frames. Again, this is a yearly chart, so this is one whole year of price action. So this is 2017, for instance, big year. 2018 was ugly; it was red. But look, notice we didn't even get close to making a new low, and then we kind of consolidated in that area for the next, call it 3 years, right? And then we had the big year 2021, right? And now we're consolidating again. So if you think about, again, that downside, last 2021 low was $716. So I wouldn't panic if I saw ETH down there. I mean, I'd be panic buying some, probably, depending on the structure of the chart. But that wouldn't be crazy, right? And if you think about Bitcoin, now this is particularly bearish. Bitcoin has actually already made a new low on the yearly chart, which is not a good look. So this is your 2013 candle, so similar to your ETH 2017 candle. That following year was a bear market, was a bear, but it really was just consolidation. I mean, look at that. It didn't even come anywhere close to making a low on that year. And in that case, that low would have been 12.77 and the high was 11.63. $12.77, that is. So that would have been a big low to make. So this was a lot of sort of support, if you will, right? Like buying pressure, right? If price were to come down, it would seem. So we consolidated there, then huge year 2017, and then just like ETH, didn't get close to making a new low, really just consolidated, and then boom. Well, look at this. Unlike here and here, we have made a new low on the yearly chart. That is very significant, I suspect. And again, that's why there's no rush to wade in right now. Like, you're not missing any opportunity, right? So we've already, so while ETH would have to fall to 700 to make a new low on the yearly chart, Bitcoin has already done that. And again, that number was 27,734. And so we're above that now. We've rebounded, right? You can see we're leaving a little wick behind, but there's a lot of year left, and this does not look good structurally. This, again, like, this would be a crazy move. The low for this candle is 38.50. I doubt we're going to get down there, right? Like, and so this is where you sort of really consult the lower time frames. That's where we're looking at the monthly chart, etc. But this gives you a sense. We've already had a major breakdown here in Bitcoin, and like things are very ugly out there in crypto land. I'll just look at a couple of other cryptos, big picture, the annual chart, just to give a sense. So Matic, which is a Polygon coin, nowhere near making a new low, but keep in mind a new low for this thing is almost 2 cents for the year. So that'll be interesting to watch. Polkadot hasn't made a new low yet. That would be $6.38. I mean, this thing is already still down massively from 56 down to 10, so over 80% down. AVAX, that number, a new low would be $2.90. So if this thing gets really ugly, which it probably will, because those charts, those cycles I just showed for Bitcoin and ETH, they're just they're going to play out in these alt layer ones as well. Phantom, new low would be a cent, a penny. And so it doesn't mean we have to get to those levels, but it's important to know where those levels may exist. For Harmony, it's less than a cent. It's actually 3. So what is that? Right, that's about 30% of 1 cent. So 0.3 of a cent is the low from last year. Jesus. That's so interesting. Um, what are other ones that might be a little? Oh, this is interesting. Decentraland coin, that low would be 6 cents. So this could be interesting to see if this thing could really unravel even more than it sort of already has. But it does give you a sense that you want to be patient. Um, Wait for the dust to settle so we have a swing low on some meaningful time frame, and then sort of take it from there. For Solana, that low would be $1.50. I doubt we get all the way down there. I think for something like this, if you look at the monthly, right, I think 32 we haven't made, like 30, once we get below 32, that's where the floodgates open. And I see this one, I see Solana, you know, yeah, Solana could definitely kiss 18. Wow, if things got really ugly, I think maybe 5. But to get down to $1.50 feels like, I mean, because that chain actually does have some utility, right? But I mean, to get down to 18 from where we are at 48 would obviously be a big whoosh down. Near not looking great. That number new low would be $1.18. And so that gives you some sense, and also gives you an idea of a kind of a reference point that you can always use. So again, the message is be patient. There is huge opportunity here because as this bear develops, prices are just going to go lower. And as new projects come online, people are building, the value in those projects isn't going to be reflected in the prices because everything is depressed. And so you'll also be able to pick up tokens from like new layer twos and things like that. I'll definitely be giving updates on this channel about all those things as all of this develops. Again, big opportunity I see here unfolding, but patience is really important because we likely have many months of downside. Ether probably bottoms sooner, especially since it has the merge catalyst. But again, Bitcoin could keep dropping to the end of the year, which is going to be a drag on the whole crypto space without, absent their own like very specific catalysts and narratives.